What's up, guys? If you're new here, my name is Dominique, but you can call me Dom, and welcome to Faith Family Homestead. I grow here in South Carolina, coastal South Carolina. It's zone 8B to be exact. This is actually my front yard. I garden in a 50 by 100 square foot, or 50 by 100 foot area, so that's about 5,000 square feet. I'm starting this video in a different location. We're actually at the back of my garden. Usually I start at the front, but I figured I would change it up and start at the back end of my garden. I have been doing garden tours about every 2 weeks, and so it's about 2 weeks again, and there's so much changes in the garden that I want to take you guys along and show you what we have going on. So we're going to start at the back end of the garden because I haven't shown these before, but we actually finally got our first blueberry harvest. We actually, right now I see some blueberries that are ready, but we've actually already picked blueberries about 2 times. I think we've probably gotten about a pound so far, but my girls just eat them. But I see some blueberries that they haven't eaten, so I'm going to go over and show you what they look like. So these bushes that you see going back this way, and there's 2 behind you, are blueberry bushes. These are the first things that we put in this garden area. We started building it from the back forward, and so we put these blueberry bushes in. We got it from a farm store, so they had already been growing, and they've been growing for about 2.5 years now. We put them in, I think, December of 2021. We're now actually almost in June, so just about 2.5 years, and this is the first year that they are loaded down with blueberries. It's amazing how prolific they are. I'm very, very happy about it. My girls don't actually like store-bought blueberries, neither do I. Every time I try to buy it, they don't eat it, but they absolutely love garden fresh blueberries. We have, I think, 8 plants in here, but then I also have 3 other blueberry plants growing in pots that I'm going to squeeze up here as well. But I'm so happy about these blueberries, and I actually kind of wish I would have put in more, just seeing how loaded they are and how much my girls really love them and how delicious they are. So in this space up towards the back of my garden is where I have 8 log raised beds. I call them log raised beds because that's how I built them 3 years ago. This property was filled with trees, and when we cut them down, I used some of the logs to make raised beds. Some of the logs are breaking apart. Some of them don't even have logs anymore, but I still consider this my log raised bed area. My original plan for this season was to grow specifically just cut flowers in this area, but a lot of the seeds that I started for cut flowers were older seed packets, and I didn't get a lot of germination, so I had to transition. And so I'll show you what I have growing in these beds right now. I do have I have one bed right here. I have one bed right here beside me that you see all of this fern-like action. All of that is a whole bed full of purple asparagus, and I'm not really sure what I'm going to be doing with that. It's been growing asparagus for the past 2 years. I had another bed growing asparagus right next to it, but I actually covered this bed because when I took the plastic off of it, right now there's plastic back on it, because when I took the plastic off, a lot of weeds just grew, and there was still asparagus in there. We dug out all of these asparagus by hand, and I guess I left some, so I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with that, and so I have it covered right now this season. And for now, I'm leaving this bed as asparagus because I'm just not really sure what I want to do with it. It's just hard to keep it weeded because asparagus is a perennial, so it comes back every year. It's just been hard to maintain the weeds, so I'm not really sure what I'm doing with that. And then this bed I have covered, but the bed right next to it, I was going to put flowers. I started all my seeds from flower, all of my flowers from seed directly in this soil, but again, weeds was growing through it, and it just didn't turn out how I expected it. And it does have a rosemary bush at the end, so what I did was I had a bunch of melon starts that I started from seed, so I just went ahead and threw them in that bed. I just recently put drip inside all of my beds, and I left that bed without drip, and it still doesn't have drip because I wasn't sure if I was going to cover it with this plastic or what I was going to do with it. But since it already had the holes, I just went ahead and weeded it. and then put the watermelon. So right now I'm turning that into a watermelon patch. I actually think it's going to do really great as a watermelon patch, because once the watermelons and cantaloupes take over, it's going to keep the weeds down. And there's also, like I said, the rosemary at the end of the bed, and there was ants in this bed, so it just took like a lot before I could have started some seeds in here. So I transitioned, and I'm happy with having it as a watermelon patch, and I think it's going to do really, really well, and at least hold off from it growing into a weedy mess this season and actually produce food. Right across from that bed, I have another bed, and this bed is actually just all winter squash. So it has acorn squash, butternut squash, spaghetti squash, any kind of squash I planted inside this bed. And I planted both of these beds had potatoes at one point, so there are some potatoes that are popping up, volunteer plants, but for the most part, you can see I'm really, really happy with how the winter squash is taking over this bed, and it's keeping weeds down, and it's looking lovely. Right across from it is actually another melon patch. I have, I think, 12 types of watermelons in there, or maybe 11 types of watermelons in there, and then I think I have one or two cantaloupes in there. But there's actually melons that are in there, so we actually still have some melons growing in here. But I love how the watermelon vine is taking over this bed. You can see that there's not soil everywhere, because these beds used to be 3 by 15, and I'm just slowly changing all of my beds over. They used to be this wood right here, and I'm slowly changing them over to these no screw beds and making them wider, so they are now 4 by 16 instead of 3 by 15. And I do have some watermelons and melons trying to grow all throughout here. So the last 3 beds I'm going to show you do have flowers in them. I have 2 that have landscape fabric, this one and the one over there, and I'll bring you in closer and show you. But I've had such hard time growing zinnia seeds this year. I usually can grow zinnia seeds from starts or straight into the ground, and this year, for whatever reason, my old zinnia seeds did not germinate when I tried to start them. I even bought multiple packs of zinnia seeds from the store and tried to direct sow them. Could not get any to germinate. It's been very, very sparse. I thought at first it was my seeds, because they were from like 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, even 2022. I think I even had some from 2023 and had the hardest time getting them to germinate. So I went and bought new seeds and still had a hard time getting zinnias to germinate. So I burnt holes in this landscape fabric, and it's spotty germination, but now I can see that there are some zinnias starting to sprout from seed, and so we'll just have a succession. So you do see some that are blooming. And you can see how we do have some zinnias starting to sprout, but then there's still lots of missing holes throughout here where zinnias have not germinated. This is me crazily planting about 5 zinnia seeds in one hole, trying to get them to germinate. So I went ahead and bought more zinnia seeds to pop in here again. My last bed up in the log raised bed area is this bed right here, and we just planted this out. I have all of these seeds that I planted from seed myself, and this is how much seeds I had germinate. But we have some cosmos, we have some status, we have some yarrow in here. But then just recently, we even have bachelor buttons. I had bachelor buttons in here for 2 years or 1 year, and then they self-seeded and have been coming back. But then I just recently, in a video with you guys yesterday, planted all of these sweet potato vines, and I'm hoping that these sweet potatoes have a lone marigold here and some basil, and I think even a borage. I'm hoping that these sweet potato vines will take over this bed to stop the weeds from growing in here. Next year, I'm still debating on what I want to. I know I have to change the logs in here because they're deteriorating and breaking down, and I'm not sure if I want to just leave them as in-ground beds or if I want to change them into wood, like I'm changing the rest of my garden into the newer wood. That was originally what I was going for, especially because of how much I deal with weeds. I'm hoping if I could build these beds up higher next year, that maybe I could lay down cardboard over all of the soil in the fall and then just put new soil on top to kind of help with the weeds. I'm not really sure, but that's why I have 2 beds covered in here, because I'm still just, this is a work in progress. It's ever changing. I brought you guys along with me, but this bed was a yellow potato bed. We just dug those yesterday, so that bed is empty, as well as that bed. That was my red potatoes, where I dug out about 60 pounds, and I just went ahead and put, this is wood shavings on top. And I have some more wood shavings because this bed was 3x15, so you can see where it's overlapping the landscape fabric. I'm going to change it into this 4x16 bed, and so I'm spreading out the soil, and then I'm going to top it like I did that bed with more wood shavings, and then leave this bed for now. These had a lot of grubs in them, and so I sprinkled the milky spores in here and this bed because I saw grubs in here and that one. This bed is going to be my perennial bed, so I have raspberries that I just got from Tractor Supply this year, so it has raspberries, and then I got strawberries in here. But last year this bed was a I think it was a cucuzzi, and so I've left, it was either a cucuzzi or trombonzino, and I'm not sure, and so I left these 2 vines here to see what it's actually turning into, if it's a cucuzzi or a trombonzino. I'm definitely hoping it's a cucuzzi because I've tried to grow cucuzzi from seed 3 times this year and have not got any germination, and so I'm hoping that it's a cucuzzi here. I do have trombonzino growing in another area, and I'll show you that when we get to that, but that's why I'm leaving the squash there. Even though it's a raspberry / strawberry bed, I'm sacrificing a little space for those squashes. This area behind me is, I'm very, very happy with it this year. It's what I call my cross bed. It does have 5 apple trees, 1 at each corner, and it does have a lavender in there, which is sprouting this year for the first time, and it looks really pretty. But I planted about 12 to 14 pumpkins in here. This will be my first year with pumpkins, and I actually have pumpkins that I'll show you when we get in closer. But I have all different varieties of pumpkins, I think between 6 to 7 different varieties, and it's taking over this bed, looking nice, keeping the weeds down, although I do have landscape fabric, and I'm really, really happy with how it looks. So moving right along, this side of my garden all has arch trellises, and the side behind you all has trellises going side by side, because that is where I have my tomatoes. I think I have over 150 tomato plants planted in this garden. But on my arch trellises, I have, specifically on these ones, I have winter squashes and some summer squashes, and I think some melons. There's not too much going on right now. I do, like I said, that's where I have my trombonzino, but basically nothing's really going too high, nothing's going too crazy. And on the opposite side of the beds, I did plant some flowers, but there's also some weeds in between. This is a 40-foot in-ground bed, and I absolutely love it. It looks full and lush. We have mostly dwarf tomato plants here, with the exception, I think I have planted 5 cherries in here because I didn't have enough dwarf tomatoes to fill out the space. So we have a mixture of dwarf tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, we have elephant garlic, and then we also have basil. All of the basil that's planted in here is basil that reseeded itself from last year, because I have grown tomatoes, basil, marigolds, and garlic in this section for 2 years in a row. So all of the basil has reseeded itself. All of the elephant garlic is garlic that reseeded itself. I forgot to harvest my elephant garlic last year, and then it just disappeared and I forgot it was there. And they all started sprouting up this winter, and so I transplanted them all the way down this 40-foot row, and they are starting to yellow. So I'm hoping that this year I have a really, really great elephant garlic season. I've been trying to grow elephant garlic here for, this will be my 3rd year, and I haven't gotten that really big bulb that elephant garlic is known for, and so we'll see this year how my elephant garlic does, but I love the space. It looks great, and it's my first time growing dwarf tomatoes. Usually I grow cherry tomatoes here, so I'm looking forward to seeing how the dwarf tomatoes do here and what they look like. This next bed is a squash bed. It was a brassica bed, but then my brassicas didn't do well because this bed was filled with ants, and so I still have probably 4 brassicas left in this bed, but for the most part it's all squashes, all summer squash. So we have zucchinis, we have yellow zucchini, circle squash, circle zucchini, and I've harvested them all. I just harvested yesterday, so there's not much harvesting to do, but then I do have some celery sprinkled in here and there, as well as I planted some zinnias from seed in here, and some sunflowers. This is a weed that I need to take out, but I just got this lemon thyme right here, and I got it because it was variegated and pretty. I got a stevia plant here. I transplanted this daylily here, as well as this oregano, but then all the rest of this is pennyroyal, and it's completely taking over, and I'm allowing it to, because then it's not growing weeds. But I'm gonna have to come in here and contain it eventually, because I have eucalyptus plant here and one back there, and it's covering it, as well as some chamomile. This is my first time growing chamomile, and I didn't even know it was harvestable here, so I'm gonna have to come out here and harvest this. I have a thyme here that I transplanted, and as well as the sage. This thyme, sage, and chamomile was all growing in my Greenstalk, and I decided I wanted to move them, so I moved them to this bed. As you can see on the opposite side of this bed, I have cucumbers, and when I can see from this side, that's a miniature white cucumber. I did plant 2 cucumbers in here that weren't actually vining cucumbers, and I misread the label. Planted it here so they're growing out rather than up, and that is the miniature white, as well as it's called the bushy cucumber, or the pick a bushel cucumber. And I harvested most of the cucumbers here yesterday. I have 12 cucumbers, 6 on this side and 6 on this side, and I harvested about 10 cucumbers from this space yesterday. All of these flowers, just flowers I picked or I bought and transplanted into this bed because I wanted to see very pretty flowers in this bed. I'm going to keep sharing this because I have new people, but this is how I keep my cucumbers looking pretty and not holy. It's because I plant amaranth next to it. Amaranth is a trap crop. I bought this amaranth because I didn't get to grow any from seed, but Japanese beetles and squash bugs like amaranth better than they like cucumbers. So you can see my cucumber leaves do not have any holes, but my amaranth that I just showed you, as well as the one down on this end, is full with holes, because the cucumber beetles and all of the bugs love to eat the amaranth better than they love your cucumbers. The cucumbers on this side, I actually need to go in there and get that cucumber. So the cucumber on the opposite side of this bed is actually cucumber that went to seed, and I let go to, well, I didn't know, it fell and went to seed last year. I didn't know this cucumber was here, and it started growing this year, and I figured it was a cucumber because the leaves look like a cucumber. This is actually on the bigger side. It's turning yellow, so the seeds are going to be bigger because it's trying to create seeds, and it's going to be harder. Let me get you a different one. But this one I believe is the salt and pepper cucumber, because when I started planting, this is how it looks. When I started planting cucumbers here this year, I dug out some tags, and one of them said salt and pepper cucumber, which is also a white cucumber. And so I'm assuming that that's what this volunteer cucumber is. I have 2 of them, and I'm going ahead and picking them because when I was out here yesterday, obviously I missed these. But this is from volunteer cucumbers. Moving right along is my favorite spot in the garden. I keep saying it is my bush beans. I have bush beans and pole beans, so there's 2 4x15 beds, but when I planted them they were 3x15. Now they're 4x16. and I do see some beans ready, even though yesterday we picked 10 pounds of beans. It's so crazy how prolific. This year would be my first year growing this much green beans, and it's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to see how many beans I could grow, because I've never canned beans. I've only ever froze green beans, and then I've used them obviously for fresh green bean eating as a side, or at the end of the season when I'm making sauce, I put them inside sauce. But this year I wanted to can some, so I'm already up to 18 pints of green beans based off of the green beans I picked in here. I think I'm up to about 17 pounds of green beans that I've picked off of these two beds, and I see green beans ready again, and that weren't ready yesterday, because like I said, we picked 10 pounds of green beans off of these plants, and they look amazing. I'm very happy with how they look, and yeah, I can't say enough. My favorite green bean to grow is the painted pony. It's stringless, it's slim, it can be used for fresh eating, or you can it can be used also for a dry bean. My favorite bean to look at would be the purple pole bean, and they grow very vibrant purple beans, very long, and I love those as well. I did succession sow these green beans, so I picked 6 pounds from this bed alone, and then the other 4 pounds was probably from the purple beans yesterday. But this bed I planted 2 weeks after I planted that bed. And these Bells of Ireland, I'm letting go of seed, because I've started Bells of Ireland from seed 2 years in a row, can't get them to grow from seed, but these self-seeded from the first year I was here, and they continue to grow back, and it's my favorite flower, so I continue to just let them grow here. But like I said, we picked 6 pounds from here yesterday, and I can already see that there's more green beans that are ready to be harvested again. Right next to it is my sweet corn. This bed is still one of the old beds, so it's still 3x15. I haven't changed this out yet. There's probably about 4 beds in my garden that are still 3x15 that I haven't changed out yet. But this is my sweet corn bed. Some are smaller than other ones, because when I realized that all the seeds wasn't germinate, I did go through and replant. And then also, just recently, I had my girls plant bean seeds, bush bean seeds, painted pony of course, in here, and I see some just starting to come up, which I'm trying to fill out this space and keep weeds from growing. And then in the fall I did sprinkle brassica seeds like kale, and I see that they're actually coming up in here, and I did exactly in this middle area, so that's interesting that it's trying to grow some kale in the heat of the summer/spring. I think this is the area of the garden where my girls are most happy for it, because this is where I have grapevines. I have 3 grapevines in here, and you can see how many grapes are trying to grow in here. And so I really do hope that we get we do have a great grape year this year, as many grapes as I'm seeing. I didn't plant anything in these beds. You can see I have 3 of the beds covered. These beds are 3x6 beds. I don't have anything planted in these beds because I'm changing these beds. Since I made these beds longer, the pathways you can see is really slim, and so I'm planning on pushing in these beds about 1 foot, which is why I didn't plant anything on this side, and then connecting them to make them run all the way down the fence. Now that I've been growing in this garden for about 3 years, each year I'm changing how I garden and what I want. I'm already writing down what I dislike and what I like, and things that I want to change for next year. Like that's why I didn't plant that row down there, is because as soon as I can, as soon as garden season's over, maybe in the fall, I'm going to be changing how I have some of my beds laid out in this garden. And so I'm not utilizing that space, but I'm growing more than enough in the spaces that I am growing in that I don't feel like I'm missing out on that area. So these are the 3 beds that I mentioned that I haven't changed out yet. This is a 3x6 bed. It has my spicy peppers, and then some didn't grow, so I changed them out with some marigolds in here. So there's some marigolds in here, there's some nasturtium, there's an eggplant. I haven't grown eggplant before, so I put that in here. But you can see they're starting to grow peppers in here. I'm pretty sure those are the pepperoncinis. We have the New Mex Parker. So you can see these plants are loaded down with peppers, and then right next door is another bed, again, of spicy peppers. This is a paprika. I'm really happy about this bed. You can see where this bed used to be 3x15, because you can see where we pulled up the old bed, and we do have to fill in through here. But this is my sweet pepper bed. I do have some nasturtiums that I planted at the side here, but I think I have 80 sweet pepper plants in here, and they are looking really, really good. I am having some peppers growing in here. That's probably the biggest pepper that I have right now. We have some smaller peppers. This area right here, I showed that it's smaller peppers because I just added the soil here in the fall, where the soil on the left and the right, you can tell the difference that soil's been here for 3 years versus the soil that I just added. So the peppers in this area are smaller, but there are peppers growing nonetheless. They're just on the smaller side. Let's talk about this pepper right here, which is called a fish pepper. I know I don't have any more seeds from here, so I know I want to save some seeds from this just because it's variegated, it's pretty, and I want to keep it growing in my garden. I did add some marigolds in here, and they haven't bloomed yet, but they are giant. And when you have to look really, really close, because there are peppers in here, but I'll miss them if I'm not paying attention. But check out this pepper. This is probably the longest pepper, and I've been leaving it in here. And that pepper I didn't even see. Look how pretty that is. Let's see what it is. This is a golden sunshine, so it's actually already gold. It's a golden bell pepper. So the last things we'll talk about are my 4 rows of tomatoes. This first row right here is filled with 30 cherry tomatoes. We have 15 on one side and 15 on the other side. This one tomato right here, which this tomato is ready, is called a tumbler tomato, and I accidentally did not see that it was supposed to be in a container, and so it does not actually grow up, it grows out. And so that is what you see right here, and we have our first cherry tomato here. But this is the cherry tomato row, and they have so many tomatoes on them. This is where we actually got our first tomato from, off of this plant. It's called a golden nugget, and you can see there are some more that I could technically pick, but I'm gonna let them vine ripen. But I wrote on the tags all of the ones that have star are the ones that I wanted to save seeds from, and so I do want to make sure I save seeds from this, which means I don't have any more seeds of this, and so I really want to focus on saving seeds off the ones that I put stars on their tags. So this is technically in the in-ground bed, but I wanted to show you the difference. This is called a velvet tomato, and you can definitely see the difference in the tomato leaves, especially towards the one right next to it. It's called a velvet red, and it's a small cherry tomato, and I put this in this bed. It's my first year growing it, but I just really love the way the leaves look, and it feels kind of like suede or velvet. This next bed of tomatoes would be tomatoes that I consider like a small tomato. So they're kind of like the Paul Robeson and Boxcar Betty, I think, is in here. We have a peach tomato, which is this right here. So the skin is kind of fuzzy, if you can see that. But these are all of our smaller tomatoes, so they're not as big as a beefsteak. When I planted it here, this bed used to be 15 feet, and so I have 12 tomatoes going down each side. So there's 24 of these type of tomatoes. And then on this side is where I have all of my beefsteaks, and I have 30. So I have 15 on each side, and there are lots of tomatoes that I can't wait to start turning. This Wisconsin 55 is the one that's first blushing down here. And then this mushroom basket is massive and so pretty. I grew so many of these last year, and it didn't have any disease, which this plant still looks great out of all of my tomatoes. And so I think I'll continue to grow it just because of how good it's been doing in my area. I've definitely been keeping an eye on all of the tomatoes that are holding off on diseases and that are blooming first or getting fruit first, just to see so that I can keep that into account. But I'm liking how all of these tomatoes over here are looking. This is called Mushroom Basket, and you can see that it's not as ridgy as the Costa Genevieve, and I grew this last year as well, and it did good. And so I'm growing it again just because of how good it did last year for me. The last stop in the tomato beds will be this determinate tomato bed. You can see it's a bushy mess in here. There's lots of disease going on, but all of these are determinate tomatoes. You can see some right up here, this Rutgers, that want to start changing. But this is an experiment. I have never grown indeterminate tomatoes like this, but I'm leaving them. I'm not pruning them. And you can see there's some right there that have lots of disease. And I'm keeping an eye on those, because then there's some down here that are just as bushy and they're not struggling with disease. Specifically, this plant looks so healthy. It has so many tomatoes on it. It's called a Stellar. I believe I got it from Haas Tools. It was either Haas Tools or Johnny's. And I did try to get tomatoes that said that they weren't going to struggle with some diseases. And I'm telling you, this has so many tomatoes on it, and it looks so healthy, even though it's grown the same way as all these other tomatoes. And then you have some up here that are really struggling with disease. But this is all an experiment for me, because like I said, I've never grown tomatoes like this without pruning, and so I'm just keeping an eye on them to see what survives, what thrives, and what doesn't. But we're still going to get a tomato harvest off of them. And so a lot of the things that I'm doing in my garden are experiments this year, or the varieties that I'm growing are experiments. All of my paste tomatoes I'm growing inside of my hoop house, and I've never grown paste tomatoes before. And so I decided that I really wanted to protect my paste tomatoes and grow them in the hoop house. I don't know how that's going to turn out. We'll see together if I can get a really good big paste tomato harvest. But I wanted to use those tomatoes for making my sauces this year. So I decided to grow them into my hoop house so that I can keep an eye on them and protect them and nurture them, and we'll see how that turns out. I just added drip about a month ago throughout this whole garden, as well as my hoop house, and I'm really liking that I don't have to water inside my hoop house, but it's like hit or miss. It's my last year I tried to grow tomatoes in there, as well as all my sweet peppers. And I've shared this story before, but I went on a missionary trip. My family got sick for like 10 days, so they couldn't water inside my hoop house. It was also like a really bad hurricane or something like that came through, or a tropical storm, and it just wiped out all of my tomatoes that I was growing in the hoop house, as well as my sweet peppers. So that's why I'm so happy for my sweet peppers this year. and I can't wait to grow them and to start harvesting from them. A lot of them are more than just the green bell peppers, and so I have to wait until they start turning. So that's why I'm leaving a lot of them, but I'm really so happy with how full the garden's looking. Like, it's filled out so great. It looks really good, and I think that this year is my best growing year so far. I do have some bug damage on some stuff, but not as nearly as much as I've had the other years. I do have BT and organic stuff that I can spray, but I really just don't like spraying things. I'm very lazy in that way, and so I just leave the bugs is what I do. And obviously that destroys some crops. I'm not suggesting that you do that. I'm just telling you what I do. But this third year, I'm really happy with how the garden's looking, how full it's looking. I struggle with attention issues, some would call it ADHD, but it's been really hard for me because I lose focus easily, and so last year I didn't even get the whole garden planted, where this year I decided, I prayed, I was like, Lord, you need to help me. I made a note and I stuck to it with what I needed to plant every week or every 2 weeks, and it actually worked out, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. I decided to run into my hoop house because it's getting really windy out there. I'll have to see if you guys can even hear me when I go to edit this video, but it's supposed to be a really bad thunderstorm in about 30 minutes, so I'm glad I finished this video before then. But you can see all of my tomatoes in here. I also planted bush beans in this bed, and so those are just starting to germinate. So I definitely have a lot to be excited for this garden season, and all of you guys that have been with me since the beginning, I know you guys are really excited as well. I have been measuring all of the harvest that I've been getting, and because at the end of the year I do want to tally up to see if I've grown enough food for my family to last, and so that way I can either up my harvest next year or even back down on my harvest or my plants next year, based off of what I grew this year. And this will be my first time keeping a detailed journal like that, so every time I'm getting harvest I'm running in and weighing it. That is if my kids don't get to it first. Like the blueberries, I haven't weighed because although that was my third harvest of blueberries that I did with you guys today, that was the only one that I've been able to get to before my kids. So I haven't weighed my blueberries, but I've been weighing all of my cucumbers, my squash, my green beans, and I'll start weighing my tomatoes as well. So I know that was a lot, you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.